So this is part 7 in our wild harvest edibles theme of our presentation series here. That prepares the table before me. And the caveat kind of beginning is that if we talk about when we talk about any therapeutic or medicinal components that can be helpful in treating or mitigating disease processes, that you do your own due diligence and then just team up with a medical practitioner that has a similar philosophy of healing that you do, just to make things go more smoothly for both of you, and just make sure that you check things out as you move forward, trying anything that we may talk about. So tonight's topic is horsetail. So this typically isn't thought of as being an edible, but it does have some edible properties. They are one of those weeds that are quite pernicious and very difficult to eradicate if you don't want them, but they do have some beneficial properties, especially from the edible standpoint. It's just the little ones that are first coming up fresh. So the ones where my arrow is coming around here, so that spike there, these guys here, as they're first coming out in the spring, typically they'll peel them and even take off the tops here and eat them like asparagus. You don't want to eat the infertile portions, although the teas can be made from them for both external and internal use, but you don't want to eat them in the same way that you would the fresh shoots. So over here, the shoots that you would eat are the fertile shoots here that come up in the spring, and the ones that are up year round you don't want to ingest from a culinary standpoint. But we'll talk about some tea uses of it and some of the uses in that method as we go along. So the North Americans, the Native Americans, use them quite a bit for food sources. The Europeans, something new for me. I've known about equisetum for a very long time. In fact, equisetum was the very first scientific word that I ever knew as a kid that I recall. So equa is horse, and sedum, so equisetum is horse tail. And there's a couple different varieties around. There's the giant one, Telematia, and then the arvents is another variation or variety of horsetail. So you want to harvest those shoots just as they're emerging from the soil. So to the right there is a dish of sauteed asparagus-like. These are fairly small shoots of horsetail. You peel the outer sheath off. It's kind of jointed in segments and kind of hollow. And typically they'll remove the pointed tip, although this particular dish shows that it's been left on. So you can steam it, saute it, eat it like asparagus. You can add it to soups and other foods to add flavor or as a thickening agent. One of the things that you'd want to do in utilizing them is cooking them in separate water and rinsing them, changing the water a couple times, because they do have some compounds that, if eaten with raw and eaten without rinsing, can have some toxic effects. Some people notice them, other people don't. It's a lot like acorns. You wouldn't want to eat raw acorns, but acorns are fine if they are ground and then they're put through several treatments of water. Sometimes they even treat them with lye to help remove any toxins from them. But then the acorn meal is a very, very key component of indigenous diets where acorns were prevalent. So changing water is a common aspect of preparing wild food, particularly that may have some mild toxicity associated with it. So you don't want to eat the infertile stalks. That's the ones that are the typical horsetail variety down here on the left. And as was noted, once you have it in your yard, it is pretty much there to stay. Although we were fortunate enough, we had some transported in topsoil and discovered early on that there was some horsetail mixed in with it. And We were very diligent about digging it out all the way down to the roots to extract it, because once it gets established, it is just really difficult to eradicate. We were able to nip it and get rid of it. So if you want it, go to a place where it already is. Probably better not to transport it onto your site, just because it's such a difficult thing to manage once you do have it. Anybody who has it can attest to that. The horsetail roots are actually can be eaten as well, and they can be eaten raw. They're a little bit tough to gather in quantity. So this person here has some of the top part along with the root. You kind of need a shovel and kind of dig deep, because they can travel quite deep in the ground. So they are not often used, but they can be eaten fresh. They're kind of more of a starvation kind of a food source, but can have some beneficial qualities. The best nutritional component of horsetail is that it's high in silica, and that's great for bone health, connective tissue health, which we'll see later on. So it's a great source of silica. Actually, the teas of it are good for your garden, actually, as long as you're not propagating the plant in your garden as well. Making a compost tea that has the horsetail in it provides silica to your plants and can be very beneficial. It is a bioaccumulator, so it can actually accumulate things like gold, copper, and zinc in its tissues, and other metals like lead and cadmium too. So you want to be careful where you harvest it from. Places that aren't going to have like agricultural runoff or other pollutants that are heavy metals in particular that could be accumulated. But silica is one of the beneficial ones. Zinc is not a bad one to have around too. You don't need a lot of copper, but that can be helpful too. You have copper is a component of some of our physiology. So some medicinal components of horsetail. So horsetail, like many things, has therapeutic activity as well as its culinary perspectives and activity, and some of those can be concurrent, actually, just through ingesting, but you would probably prepare them. In fact, in most cases, you do prepare them in different ways. So that high silica content is very beneficial for the joints and connective tissue. And in fact, that is helpful in helping to eradicate the signs of aging. So wrinkles and things like that associated with skin. It has a mild diuretic effect and is a astringent. So astringent tends to constrict blood vessels, and in that regard, it's a styptic. Essentially, it's very beneficial in stopping bleeding. So if you have some horsetail around the dried tops, you can even powder those yourselves, dry it and powder it. Can be very helpful. You can put it right on a wound or a cut. It'll stop the bleeding and aid the healing. It aids the healing in a variety of different ways, being antiseptic and antibacterial, antimicrobial. So it can be very helpful in that. This is a poultice on a finger that has an owie on it, and so just a typical kind of juicy poultice. Can also aid excess menstruation when used as a poultice, or as a supplement rather. Functioning in the astringent qualities and the it's not hemorrhagic or anti-hemorrhagic, but it's can aid in abating bleeding. So that high silica content is helpful in creating strong, healthy hair. So you could use it as a wash, also use it internally, teeth and bones. And it actually is helpful in osteoporosis, aiding in bone density increases when used on a consistent basis. Now, consistently, it's been recommended that it's not be used for a long term, so probably intermittently, but consistently intermittent would probably be a good idea. So maybe a month on, a month off, something like that. Because if you use it consistently for too long a period, we'll talk about some of the issues that could arise with prolonged use. Actually, you can make a powder out of it that, along with horsetail, the horsetail powder can aid in cavity abatement and enamel repair, which is something you don't hear of very often, and something I want to look into more, because enamel is something that is said to not be regenerative, but it seems as though there may be maybe some things that actually do help that. So that would be exciting to find. It's helpful in dropsy or edema, so basically just fluid retention. It helps the body functioning as a diuretic remove that excess fluid that is causing the edema and other kidney issues. So if there are excess salts that are present, it can help them, it can help your body excrete it more efficiently. So again, it's not a long-term use kind of a thing, more of a short-term approach. Better to use it in a pinch and then find out what the underlying issues are, and then you can pull off its use. It also helps eliminate uric acid. Uric acid is one of the primary components of kidney stones. Also tends to be present in gout. So having that eliminated is a good idea if you want to avoid those kinds of things. So again, in the signs of aging, so essentially wrinkles and things like that, lines, silica is an important component to collagen. So it aids the health of the skin, keeping it tight and supple, reduces fine lines. You can use it internally for short term, but also externally. So here's a horsetail butter per se. It's not butter, but it's probably got maybe olive oil or beeswax or something like that, or aloe, and use the powder in that to put on as a cream. So use it as a salve. It's also helpful in infections because it's an antioxidant and anti-inflammatory, and actually has antifungal and antimicrobial roles. Helpful in treating skin infections, so fungal skin interactions, for example. So a warm compress or a poultice of the crushed dried herb, use that 2 to 3 times a day until your symptoms abate. That would be an external use, so that could be used for a fairly long time if need be. Some time ago, we talked about oregano as being a useful herb for eliminating toenail fungus. This is helpful in foot fungus. So like athlete's foot, may be helpful with the toenail fungus too, soaking the water in a generously supplied bath of horsetail. So boil that water with horsetail in it, and then as it cools, you can bathe your feet in it 15 minutes a day, every day, if you're treating a foot fungus situation like athlete's foot or something like that. And you can use it as a preventative as well, doing on an alternating daily basis if need be. If you're prone to foot fungus at a particular time of year or something like that, it could be beneficial as a preventative measure. Interestingly enough, it's also beneficial in respiratory issues like congestion and bronchitis. So Horsetail Tea, basically creating a vapor tent like you might do with eucalyptus or even cedar boughs, and inhale the vapor of the horsetail tea. You can also use that horsetail tea in your humidifier, so it can actually humidify the room or diffuse that horsetail tea vapor into a larger area than just a tent. So it helps to break down the nasal congestion, bronchial congestion, functioning as an expectorant. So an expectorant is a quality of an herb that helps you to expel mucus more easily, helps break it up, so it doesn't get so clingy and tight to your airways. Also helps strengthen the immune system, particularly in the respiratory area. The respiratory tract is the primary entry point for pathogens into the body, bacteria, fungus, viral types of things. Other points of access are like through the skin infections are the other sources of access. Also an anti-inflammatory. So inflammation of the airways. So it may be beneficial in even things like asthma, because asthma is an inflammation of the bronchial tubes that causes constriction of the airways. So if you can decrease that inflammation, if you have nothing else and all you have is horsetail, use horsetail. Also indicated for sore throats, gargling a mixture of salt water, horsetail powder, and lemon juice several times a day until the symptoms go away can be helpful. Nice to have alternative tools in your tool bag. depending on what you have available, you can use what you have. And if you happen to have it growing right there on your parcel, that can be helpful. Otherwise, you might have to go out and collect it elsewhere. So it can actually be helpful for UTIs, bladder issues, and frequent urination. So even though it is a diuretic, it also can aid bladder infections. So you can use that in a capsule form. So the powder again, and that would be the powdered horsetail infertile fronds, 2 grams 3 times per day. That's a maximum. It can be helpful for UTI and urgent frequent urination, which is associated with UTIs. So there's not, we don't, have a smattering of different things that are out there for UTIs. UTIs are something that is very difficult to treat, typically without an antibiotic. Mannose is a key sugar or carbohydrate that helps keep the bacteria from adhering to the urinary tract and helps the body to expel it. But there's also some components present in horsetail and a few other things we've talked about as well that can aid UTIs from a natural perspective. Also, for the aid in the urinary tract, soaking in a bath with horsetail powder in it can be helpful. 15 minutes several times a week if you're prone to or having any urinary infection issues. Some immune enhancement and anti-inflammatory effects. So it has both antiseptic and antibacterial properties. Horsetail does, and it can boost the immune system and protect against incoming pathogenic bacteria. And it's basically a systemic anti-inflammatory, so it aids the whole body in reducing inflammation. So there must be some antioxidant effects associated with horsetail. You can use it as a tea or as a powder in a capsule form. Regularly for optimum benefit, so regularly for a period of time, up to 2 months in duration. You don't want to go beyond that. Probably a little less than that would be better. So you want to have some other modalities in your back pocket too, so you can alternate different herbs. Also helpful in thinking. So brain function and thinking, actually it can increase the development of new nerves. So neurogenesis in the brain, so aids the interlocking pathways that can be developed, and that's what happens when you learn. When you think, you're creating new pathways in your brain. It doesn't necessarily create new neurons per se, but new pathways and new connections. So it's helpful in various forms of dementia and Alzheimer's. You typically used in a capsule form again. And interestingly enough, it has some insulin stabilization or blood sugar stabilizing effects in the body. So balancing insulin levels associated with diabetes. So it can help to lower blood sugar and basically evens things out. Someone who is on uncontrolled diabetes typically has a roller coaster of high blood sugar, then crashing to low blood sugar. And it's just this constant seesaw. Using horsetail for a temporary intermittent stay to that roller coaster can be something that would be nice to have that knowledge in your back pocket. If you didn't have medication or other ways of maintaining a stable blood sugar. So typically the best way to manage blood sugar is actually dietary, choosing a diet that is low glycemic, so that doesn't send you on that roller coaster. Because with the roller coaster, it just is a snowball to lots of other effects like neuropathies and blood circulation issues and systemic inflammation. So some cautions. So you want to use horsetail in moderation. So again, it's not for long-term consistent use. But if you use it intermittently on a rotating basis with something else that has a similar effect, that can be helpful. Some side effects that could appear after two plus months of continuous use would be some deficiency. So thiamine deficiency and potassium deficiency. Potassium deficiency can be a fairly significant thing. It has some long-standing or significant ramifications with a potassium deficiency. So you want to maintain potassium. In fact, it's important that we get enough potassium in our diet because we're constantly losing potassium. Sodium, our body can actually completely shut off sodium loss if needed, and use that kind of recycle it in our body. But sodium has a ratio that is always lost, and that ratio depends basically on how much urine is passing through your body, and it fluctuates a little bit, but there's always some loss. So it always needs to be replaced. And if it gets acceleratedly lost, then we can maybe not keep up with the replacement values of it. So it can also cause lowered blood sugar levels that are unhealthful. Nicotine toxicity, which if you're not using tobacco isn't an issue, but it could lead to toxicity for those who happen to be using it, and it could cause kidney irritation, even though it is beneficial for as a diuretic and for relieving uric acid buildup, etc. Protracted use of it could lead to irritation. So again, you want to collect it from a clean area because it does have a tendency to bioaccumulate toxins or heavy metals that might be in an area, particularly from agricultural runoff. So you want to select your site as carefully as possible so it won't have toxic byproducts associated with it. If you're pregnant or lactating, you don't want to use it, just avoid it for the time being, and use it later after that is finished. So a recipe for horsetail tea. You can use 2 to 3 teaspoons of horsetail, so that'd be ground powder horsetail, in a cup of spring water or just regular clean pure water. You can sweeten it with some raw honey. Pour the water over the horsetail and bring it to a boil for about 5 minutes, and then just let that simmer down and steep for additional 15 minutes. So it's a 20-minute process time. And if you're looking to kind of boost the silica content to help your bones in osteoporotic conditions, you can boil longer to extract the silica to a greater extent. And then you can strain that so you don't have all the particulate matter associated with it. And if you wish, sweeten it to taste. So a couple different studies I found that talked about horsetail use. So there's a randomized double-blind clinical trial looking at the diuretic effects, and it was from the Evidence-Based Complementary and Alternative Medicine back in 2014. And they found the diuretic effects were comparable to that of hydrochlorothiazide, 25 milligrams. So an equivalent diuretic effect to a pharmaceutical diuretic. The second one that I found was that equisetum has antibacterial activity and has some modulating effects on oxidative stress, essentially functioning as an antioxidant, which helps reduce inflammation and program cell death of blood vessel lining cells from oxidative medicine and cellular longevity. So these experimental findings suggest that equisetum has antibacterial effects, particularly on gram-positive bacteria. And if it's administered in low doses, maybe a new therapeutic approach for disease associated with hypertonic conditions and oxidative stress and programmed cell death or apoptosis. So in particular, it has antimicrobial effects, and they noted it in gram-positive bacteria. So again, here's horsetail. So the fertile heads that are just coming up there are the long ones here with the lighter caps on it. These would be the ones that would be picked and eaten like asparagus, would be peeled and cut the tops off. They can be boiled in a couple changes of water, toss that water off, and then you could use them sauteed or in salads and things like that. These are the infertile fronds that are typically seen year-round, and these are the ones that you would take the horsetail hairs here, and you could dry those, and those would be used in teas and for silica extraction for bone health, etc.